Okay, everyone, welcome to week 3, form, content, and context. So this week we have reading from your visual culture text, and you're looking at art text, but there's not as many assignments due this week. So a lot of reading, lecture material, that kind of stuff. And then there's one assignment that I want you to focus on, and then you have your quiz. So not as much item-wise going on, but there's a reason for that because I really want you to focus on this outline. Be looking for your theory, your theory application images and your mini art cyclopedias, all that good stuff from last week. By Friday, I'll have all that grading done and back to you. Any questions about any of your grades so far, please don't hesitate to let me know. So visual culture, chapters 2 and 4 on form and ideology. These are a little bit heavy, so I've made sure to give you lots of notes here. And you're looking at art, chapter 6, which is art in and out of context, which should lend itself to these chapters as well. And then I have a PDF lecture for you to download, which there are some clips in there. So just make sure that you hover over any images. For example, where is it? Not this one. Let me go down. Just as you hover over, you'll notice, oh, this one. This one's got a video link to it. If you hover over it, and it allows you to click on it. This one does as well. And I believe this one does, and there might be one more. Yes, this Duchamp one. Make sure you watch this, especially students tend to really, freak out about Duchamp and this idea of the fountain, and so let's just kind of keep an open mind when we get to this section and what this whole idea of conceptualism was all about. Let's keep it in historic and cultural context. That's part of what we're learning about this week. And if you get to this section and you're thinking about Dada art and Duchamp and in your reading and you're just feeling like this is just not making sense, let me know. Send me a quick email and I can give you a mini lesson in that as we go. So in your visual culture text, definitely focus on Roger Fry, and he talks a lot about what form is. There's more to art than just imitation of reality. I've given you a couple of videos here that are examples that are used in the text, so you might want to go watch this clip about Jackson Pollock because it talks a lot about Pollock. Watch the music video Wonderwall. He talks about this in the text. And we're going to go over Fry's 5 emotional elements of design. These are really important because this is part of your theory application paper. So he talks about the rhythm of the line, mass, space, light and shade, and color, and how these elements that artists use and manipulate their work with are what can define our emotional interaction with this piece of art. So, if you use arbitrary color that may not be the color that you would find in the natural world for that object, it's maybe having to do with an emotional angle for the artwork, for example. In chapter 4, he's talking about this guy named John Berger. This is probably the most complicated chapter you'll read this 8-week session in this text. So just approach it knowing that it's going to be a little bit difficult. Have an open mind. And again, let me know if there are sections that don't make sense to you. So he's going to have this whole idea that seeing comes before words, that sometimes we can't necessarily describe in words what we're seeing, and so we can try, though. But part of that, this whole idea of, a picture being worth 1,000 words, of this whole, idea of the image as being this great, grand thing, that we tend to make art of the past into this mystic thing that is mysterious. We give it this power that maybe we wouldn't give objects that are created today, but because time has passed and this whole idea of cultural context and historical context and distance has happened, we tend to kind of glorify these objects a little bit. So how is an ideological approach that we've kind of been doing, both descriptive and prescriptive? How does it describe the work of art, and how does it prescribe meaning to it? He talks about recontextualizing the past, this whole idea of the holy relic debate, which I was just talking about a second ago. He talks about religiosity and pilgrimage, that we tend to treat these objects, for the Mona Lisa, for example, as these, grand items that, have to be seen in person. And so there's this idea of authenticity with these, that we have this pilgrimage, this religious experience with these works. And why is that? Is that having to do with how we mystify these works of art? Is it how we describe and prescribe meaning to them? There's a documentary, and I will include the link in here, called Da Vinci, The Lost Treasure. And we used to have this as a required viewing, and we don't anymore. But it's something that if you want to watch, it's really cool. It's about an hour long. It was from about 2012, 2013, where they just recently discovered a new Da Vinci, and that's like finding a needle in a stack of needles, because there's only been there's less than 20 actual Da Vinci paintings out there in the world. People think he had so much prolific work, and he had lots of notebooks and sketches and drawings and writings, but actual paintings are very rare. And so it was quite an exciting thing, and it's actually a painting of Christ too. So then we have this idea of context. Can a work mean something different for us today than it did for its original audience based on our knowledge of the world? And so they, in the text, they give the example of Hans Holbein the Younger. It's called The Ambassadors, and I've included a page on that for you if you want to look at it in a little more detail. So we want to talk about symbolism of the image, art being polemic. So look at this idea, make sure you watch out for that word and what that means. He talks about another theorist named Fuller and his perspective. He talks about the politics of gender, how women are viewed in art. So this is a really interesting section. This idea of a nude versus being naked in a work of art, that's an interesting concept to approach theoretically. Laura Mulvey is another woman who is mentioned, a theorist in this chapter, and she's has some really interesting things to say. She wrote a very interesting book about this idea of the point of view in art, and how there's this school of thought in the art world that we all are viewing art from this male point of view, that's how we are culturally taught, whether we're male or female, because of the perspective that's being given to us in these art objects. There's one more theorist named Thompson who talks about a 3-part analysis, and this is the social and historical conditions in which texts are produced. So that's important to analyze. Also the way they are received by real people, which is us today, and then our familiar close analysis of the text under discussion. So discussing it with each other can sometimes bring out new perspectives. So a lot in this chapter. Please, again, let me know if there's things that you're not quite grasping or understanding. It's a deep one. And let's get to the real meat and potatoes of this week. You're going to write an outline for your theory application paper. So last week you selected your images. I'm actually going to look at those today and get those back to you so that you can start working on this outline and make sure that those are appropriate images for your outline and for your paper. So I have included a PDF and a Word document of this template. And so this is a 6 to 8 page paper. And the reason I have you do an outline for it, and some of you may think, gosh, I never write outlines for papers. But I think it's helpful here because writing about art is kind of a whole new ballgame if you've never done it before. So this is going to help you, and it's going to help you break it down. And then it will give me a chance to grade your outlines and look at them in detail, give you some solid feedback for when you write your actual paper. This is only worth about 35 points, and sometimes students don't do it or they submit it really late and they think it's not that big of a deal. But then it may really affect your grade for your actual paper, because I promise that I give as much feedback as I can on these outlines, and I make sure that you're A-okay. Usually, if you apply the feedback I give you on your outline, you're looking at an A paper. So really important that you complete these as much as possible. The more you write, the more feedback I can give. I would go with this idea that your outline, anyone should be able to take it and write your paper off of your outline. So think of that while you're doing it. So let's go ahead and take a look at that really quickly here. So this is what it looks like. Again, think of this as all the research, note-taking, pre-planning for your paper. Be thorough. The more effort you put into your outline, the better your paper will be. So you're almost writing your paper this week and then just putting it into an essay format next week. So I want to see a strong introduction, a good hook thesis sentence that, grasps your audience's attention. Introduce your two chosen works and introduce the theories that will be discussed. So Panofsky and Fry, right? This should just be, you can do like one good paragraph on Panofsky and Fry and what their theories were, what they're about. Make sure when you introduce them the first time that you put their full names. We always want to put someone's full name the first time, and then later on in the paper you can just refer to them as Panofsky or Fry. When you introduce your two chosen works, you don't have to, in the actual text of the paper, include all the citation information. This is Van Gogh's Starry Night, painted in 18, you don't need to do that. You can just introduce them briefly and say, why you chose these perhaps. Just remember that we don't use first-person narrative in academic papers. Then you're going to go into your section on Panofsky. So you're going to take your first image, you're going to walk through the primary, secondary, tertiary level, and I would include research here in this intrinsic level. That's where you want to really focus on that. This should be your longest of the three. If your primary is really long and your tertiary is really short, we got a problem, right? So this is where, what we're working up to from the primary and secondary level. So make sure that you do that. So you do that for both images. And then we dive into Fry, who we're reading about in this week's reading. So I want you to look at how your chosen works illustrate this principle of the actual and imaginative life that Fry talks about. So you may be looking at a painting of a horse, and that horse exists in the real world, but the way the artist has interpreted this horse is imaginative, right? It's not a real horse, it's an image of a horse that is being created from the mind of this artist. So how is the emotional impact shaped not by what is shown, but by how it is shown? This is a preface for really digging into those 5 emotional elements of design. So this is where you think about, is the artist abstracting? Are they being very naturalistic? How is the emotional impact being shaped by the line, the mass, the space, the light and shade, and the color? So this is a preface for then diving into those in detail. So I want you to compare and contrast the two images, breaking down each of these 5 elements of design. Make sure that you include a strong conclusion to your paper. Often students, they just end here and the paper just stops and they don't kind of sum up the ideas. So again, just kind of rephrase how the theories of Panofsky and Fry have been useful in discerning the meaning and emotional impact of these 2 works of art. What else to include in your outline? Any quotes from the text or outside research that you will be using in your paper, go ahead and put them in your outline under the number or letter. So wherever you would be using those quotes, most likely it's going to be here, right, in your tertiary level or intrinsic level. Make sure you do a works cited section now. I want to make sure that you're formatting that correctly. Make sure you include your actual images with proper citations here in the outline. Remember, do not write in first person narrative voice, so no I, me, my, right? We want to keep this as an academic approach to this paper. The reason, and I talk about this in that writing styles presentation, I believe, you don't have to back up opinions. Opinions are opinions. So if you say I believe or I think or I saw or I interpreted, you don't have to then give evidence to kind of prove that. So when we go from a more academic approach, you're really having to support your ideas with data, right? So make sure that you are doing that throughout your paper. So any questions on your theory application paper, please let me know. Remember, I'm your biggest advocate. I want to see you succeed. So fill this out, do this outline really detailed. I'll give you some feedback. I'll give you that encouragement you need to make sure you know you're going in the right direction, and we'll have good papers on our hands. So you also have your quiz. Again, remember, 1 attempt, due Sunday by midnight. So you've got your quiz and your outline. That's all that's actually due this week. We used to have a discussion board, but I've taken that out because I really want you to focus on this. And that's what we got going on. Looking forward to seeing your mini art cyclopedias, and be looking for your images, your selected images by the end of today so that you can start working on those outlines. And have a great week, everyone.